Now you've done a whole, as you just mentioned, you've done a whole bunch of shorts. Some of them relate to Knives and Skin. Tell us about that. Tell us, why did you sort of compartmentalise them into shorts and then decide to do the feature?
Well, I mean, for me, I'm a very impatient person, and I have not ever been the type of filmmaker who is just waiting for that kind of like perfect financing package, you know. And I've never felt that it was like a feature-length film or nothing. And so I actually come from the art world in terms of like moving image making. I say sometimes that I'm like the impossible love child of Steve McQueen and Maya Deren, you know,
okay, yep.
Experimental filmmaker who was a dancer. I was a dancer for a long time, and then a feature-length filmmaker who had Steve McQueen had this whole, life doing moving image work in galleries and museums as installations. So that's kind of where I started, and so the short form was always an option, for instance, and their short films are cheap to make. You can make them faster, and I found that with a short film, audiences are willing to do a lot more work than in a feature length. So I've been able to really experiment with some of the elements that eventually made their way into Knives and Skin. And those short films, have done really well, sort of both in the States and outside. They've been to Sundance and Berlin and London. And so I knew that the content, what the stories that I was telling and the way that I was telling them had an audience. And so I started writing, a feature length, not a feature length version of any of the shorts, but a feature length film that was borrowing from themes of the shorts that had worked. And and here we have Knives and Skin, and so far audiences are loving it just as much as the short.
A lot of people say, how would you describe it? And I kind of think it's kind of River's Edge meets Mean Girls or Heathers. And with a very strong musical element.
It's true. It's true. I mean, it has, I should also say that it's exactly the film that I set out to make.
Brilliant.
It wasn't a film that I thought was going to be this horror heavy or thriller heavy, or it has lots of musical elements. But I don't think of it as a musical.
No.
It is a coming of age story. That has surreal elements. It certainly is related to something like River's Edge. For me, River's Edge more than Twin Peaks.
Which a lot of people reference Twin Peaks,
right,
which I love as well.
But I mean, of course. And so but I feel comfortable in this space where this film is like genre borrowing or genre adjacent, and using some of those. Some of the really recognizable tropes of genre film to sort of, propel some of the narrative moments in this story forward.
And it's an astonishingly confident picture. I mean, we're going to be screening it this afternoon, and I will sometimes say, it's going to look and sound amazing on the big screen. This one, it really, really will. You haven't been to the cinema yet. Just wait to see the size that it's going to be. It's an incredible achievement. How did you achieve that? I mean, how did you achieve that level of technical competence, etc.?
Well, again, it's like I've done a lot of short films and been able to make a lot of mistakes in those shorts, but have also been able to experiment in the shorts, both with a kind of art direction or lighting. With wardrobe, with cross dissolves, with a lot of the things that made it into, with singing, with the things.
And the colours.
100%.
Yeah.
So I had an early on conversation with my DP, and we both agreed that we wanted to shoot it with vintage anamorphic lenses. So we, which when my producer first saw that sort of line item, he said, these are very expensive lenses. And I said, just say yes or no. If it's no, we'll figure out something else. But if it's yes, then I don't want to talk about the money, or that's not, that's your problem, not my problem. But we knew that if we did it right, and we made sure that every single sort of moment in that wide frame, was filled with something to look at, whether it was objects or characters or just this kind of like vibrating magenta, right? Then we would have made something really cinematically very special. And the way that the vintage anamorphic lenses work in particular is like there's just these really kind of amazing sort of soft moments in the frame, which at first drove my editor crazy. He was convinced that all the footage he was getting was totally, out of focus. And we said, well, you're not wrong with some parts of it. The focus kind of falls away and then comes back again. But I think that's part of also what makes using those lenses for this film like such a good combination. I don't think that vintage anamorphic lenses work for everything, but I think that the combination of these make it feel that they kind of propel the fantastical elements of this film. And so even though it was obviously a much bigger budget than I've ever worked with, a much bigger crew than I've ever worked with, a much bigger cast than I've ever worked with, I still feel like this film for me feels like totally handcrafted. Like I had my hands and my face and my brain and my heart in every single frame of that film.
I think that really, really shines through on the screen. You mentioned the cast, so I actually watched in the preparation before Frightfest, I've watched a whole lot of your shorts, which are available online. You must check them out. And some of the cast elements were from them, weren't they? So tell us about the cast.
Yeah, so the cast for Knives and Skin comes all entirely out of Chicago, which if you were to mentioning that to people in New York or LA, they would say it would be impossible to cast a feature-length film that had an ensemble cast all out of a city that's not known for its film industry, but what it's known for is its theater. And so we knew that we would find these really amazing performers, like characters, who were totally committed to to acting, to performances, and I also knew that I could get away with some of the weirder exchanges, the weirder dialogue based moments, if it was grounded in these really believable performances. And there's so much kind of melodrama in the art direction that I also wanted these performances to be like more deadpan than otherwise, right? And it really wasn't hard. I mean, everybody who agreed to be in the film really loved the script. I'm not a director who doesn't give the script to my actors ahead of time or anything like that. I was like, I don't want there to be any surprises, because there's some provocative elements that, that people needed to be on board for. And so, everybody came and really wanted to be, part of telling this kind of complicated, kooky story that's kind of a musical, kind of a horror, kind of a thriller, very much coming of age, very much about, female empowerment.
Absolutely.